My name is Jerry Jarzinka. I'm your prosecuting attorney for Jackson County, and I want to welcome you here to Jackson College for our second drug summit on prescription drug abuse and heroin in our county. I want to thank you all for coming. As prosecuting attorney, certainly police and prosecutors, we certainly can go after heroin dealers who are in the drug trade, but because the problem has become so immense in our county and in our state, in our country, we wanted to take a community-wide approach, bringing people from all over in our county, our community, to address this issue. And that means that people, families, people in the medical community, people in prevention, people in treatment and recovery, and law enforcement. And before we go any further, I would like to just take a very brief moment of silence for those who have died from heroin and prescription drug abuse addiction, not only this year, but in past years. Thank you. There are a number of startling statistics out there, but one of them, which is shocking, from the Center for Disease Control, is that their latest report, data I believe from 2012, states that more people die from drug overdose deaths in the United States than either auto accidents or by homicides. If you've heard all about the shootings in the United States, that's a stunning number, and gives you just a glimpse at the immensity of this problem that we're looking at and addressing today. A couple things I want to mention too, housekeeping. Out the door to your right in the hallway, there's some bathrooms there. If you need to go, feel free to do so during any time during the speakers who are talking today. In addition, on your table, there should be note cards. If you have any questions, we have drop boxes over in the registration table. You can drop those off. We will be taking questions after each speaker speaks today, but if we don't have time, we do have a panel session at the very end of the day for Q&A to make sure anyone has any questions whatsoever. Those can be answered by our panelists, our speakers. Also, I just want to note that because this is a community-wide event, this past year we had quarterly meetings that came out of this drug summit for the different areas, medical, law enforcement, treatment and recovery, prevention, and family impact. We're going to do that again here in 2016. The first meeting, if you want to note, is going to be the third Thursday of those months. It's going to be January 21st, 2016. Location to be announced, but we're hoping that it's going to be someplace on the campus of Allegiance Health. But we invite all citizens to be involved in one of those work groups. We need your help. We need your involvement. Finally, I want to recognize and thank a number of people. First of all, again, I want to thank all of you for coming here, taking the time today to be here. This is an important issue for our community because it impacts not only individuals and families, but because this type of addiction affects criminal behavior. Many crimes we have in our county are related to drug addiction or drug use. So I want to thank our sponsors that made this event possible today: the Kraft Agency, AOS American Office Solutions, Jackson College, Walton Insurance Group, Hearst Electric Company, Office Max, Advanced Care, Andy's Angels, K&A Machine and Tool, Fritz Advertising, Allegiance Health, Jackson County Substance Abuse Prevention Coalition, Wilby Transit Mix Company, Nat Gross, and Shedlight Productions. And I also want to thank the planning committee that made this possible. Many hours are spent preparing and planning for this event to make it happen. I want to thank Kathy Arnold, Shelley Campbell, LaDenna Fredette, Mike Hurst, Shannon Jackson, Pete Jansek, Renee Marks, Raven Moore, Christopher Simpson, Susan Querbeck-Soltis, Christopher Reisner, Steve Robinson, Sarah Soul, Steve Sitka, and David Tanai. And I also want to give a special thanks and a shout out to President Dan Phelan in Jackson College. This is a beautiful venue to have this event. And in addition to that, there was such a strong interest in this event that actually we had a waiting list, and Dr. Phelan and the college was very gracious enough to make accommodations in seating and food and materials to make sure that people wanted to come could be here today. So I'd like to just give a special round of applause to Dr. Phelan. In addition, I want to thank all our speakers who agreed to be here today and volunteer their time and to be present, to present. And also, finally, I want to recognize officials who are present today. First off, I'd like to recognize State Representative Earl Pileski, 64th District. Thank you for being here. Also, I'd like to recognize Mayor Bill Jors. City Commissioner Craig Pappen. County Commissioner Carl Rice. County Commissioner Julie Alexander. And County Commissioner Phil Duckham. I'd also like to recognize Blackman Township Supervisor Pete Jansek. Also, Blackman Leone Township Director of Public Safety, Mike Jester. And also, Deputy Chief of the City of Jackson Police Department, Elmer Hitt. And finally, representing the State Police, Detective Lieutenant Lisa G. Cram. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Daniel Phelan, President of Jackson College. Dr. Phelan has served as President of Jackson College here in our county since April of 2001. He holds a PhD in Philosophy and Higher Education Administration from Iowa State University, a Master's in Business Administration from St. Ambrose University, a Bachelor of Arts in Business Administration, and an Associate of Arts in Liberal Arts from Mount St. Clair College. Previously, Dr. Phelan served as the President of Southeastern Community College. Prior to that, he served as Executive Vice President of Education and Student Services at Western Nebraska Community College, and as Executive Director of the Business and Industry Institute at Johnson County Community College in Kansas. Dr. Phelan is a board member of the Jackson Enterprise Group, member of the Board of Governors of the Jackson Area Chamber of Commerce, and serves in the local Citizens Bank Board. Dr. Phelan.
Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being here today. Before I forget, and adding to the prosecutor's comments, in addition to the restrooms that are out to my left, there's also a defibrillator out there, should we need that. And should we have a fire or an incident today, the best way is out these doors here. So I wanted to get that information to you. You know, it's warm enough, perhaps I should talk to you about where to shelter in case of a tornado. I'm not entirely sure about that, but 60 degrees this weekend, it sounds like. Thank you so much for being here. It is a privilege to host you, and we thank the prosecutor and the team for continuing to partner with Jackson College to that end. You know, this is a very trying issue for all of us nationally and certainly locally. And in the course of dealing with illegal substances or prescription drugs, we're hit with lots of numbers. In fact, today I dare say that we're going to be hearing lots of numbers. Numbers like 70% of all violent crimes are drug and alcohol related. Numbers like 135,000 people each year will die because of the consequences of drugs and alcohol. Some $46 billion each year will be spent in dealing with drugs and alcohol. And you'll hear many more numbers today. You know, if you let it, those numbers can be so overwhelming, you wonder, what can I do? What can I do? What possibly can I do? Of all the numbers that you will hear today, ladies and gentlemen, the most important number is 1. The most important number is 1. The power of 1. You, the one person who came today, the one person who can bring someone next year, the one person who talks to a student, the one person who reaches out to say, make a different choice, the one person who volunteers to counsel, the one person who says, I demand something different from my community, the one person who reaches out. The power of 1, the most important number of all the numbers you'll hear today. I grew up in the Tallgrass Prairie region of Iowa. I remember as a young shaver going out, my dad told me, Dan, go out and plow this field. And back then we had small bottom plows and it took a long time to plow a field. And I said, Dad, man, this is so big, that's a big field. And I said, how do you want me to do that? And he said, start by plowing the first acre. You know, start somewhere. We start with the power of 1, ladies and gentlemen. The power of 1. And I was talking with a prosecutor about our privilege in hosting you here, and we're talking about providing even more space. I even kind of half-jokingly said, maybe next year we'll have it in the Potter Center, and the Sheffer Music Hall holds 1,800 people. Can you imagine if we had 1,800 ones coming together to make a difference for our community? That we should stay with this to these thousands and thousands of numbers become 0. That's the power of 1. At Jackson College, we are your full partners in this fight. We have done so by a variety of activities. You should know that we have a health clinic in partnership with Allegiance Health on our campus. We also have clinical staff there and counselors to help individuals who are dealing with this. We have also incorporated in all of our housing, we house some 500 students on campus, that part of the training for all of our students and all of our RAs and residence directors is about drugs and alcohol and the dangers associated with that. But that's not enough for us. Starting this fall, we're currently working with our faculty that we require a freshman orientation for our students, and we require a freshman year seminar. This is the 3-credit-hour course for every student, required for everyone coming through the college. Our faculty and our instructional staff are working right now to make sure for this semester-long course that embedded within that instruction is a focus on drug and alcohol, the dangers associated with it, and the responsibility and the power of 1. That starts this fall. Ladies and gentlemen, we are your full partner in this effort. We will continue the fight with you. Thank you so much for coming to Jackson College today.
Thank you, Dr. Phelan. That was wonderful. Our first speaker today is going to be covering the area of family impact, led by Mike Hurst. I just want to say a few words to introduce Mike. Mike was born and raised in Jackson County as a graduate of Jackson High School. In 1986, Mike started his own family electrical business, Hurst Electric Company, which continues to be successful today. Hurst Electric are members of the Jackson Commercial Contractors Association and the Greater Jackson Chamber of Commerce. Mike is married to Rindy Hurst. They have 4 daughters, 1 son, Andy, who passed away in 2010 from a heroin overdose. Mike is a founding member of the Grass Lake Community Wellness Initiative, and Mike and his family also founded Andy's Angels, a nonprofit foundation formed to educate the community on opiate abuse and provide support for families and those suffering from addiction. Mike Hurst.
Brought notes today. That's quite unusual for me. But thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate those nice remarks. And you know, I brought my son with me today. Obviously, that's a little emotional for me. But today has got to be real. This is what it's really about. This is where it all ends. This is the end of the line. Right here. Beautiful 24-year-old son reduced to ashes in an urn. We're really tired of that in this community. And we're going to do everything we can possibly do to prevent that from happening to more families, more young kids, And if Andy were here today, he'd want to tell you that same thing. He'd want to tell you what it's like to be an addict. He'd want to tell you the horror behind it. He'd want to tell you how hard it is to break out of addiction. Doesn't matter how hard you try. 9 out of 10 struggle their entire life trying to break away from this drug. So I just want to bring him here, and yes, that's an emotional event for me to bring my son with me. And I like what Jerry said. You got 4 daughters and a son. Yeah, I still have a son. He just got to heaven ahead of us. We're all going to get there. He just beat us there at this time. So when people say I've lost my child, I try to remind them, you haven't lost anything. He's not with you right now, but he'll be with you in the future. So enough of that, and I like to get emotional a lot when I talk. So I think it's important to have emotion. So anyway, what I really want to talk about today, though, is a little bit of brief history. We got to know what we're talking about here. You got to know what you're up against. You got to know what you're fighting. And I'm going to give you a little brief history of opiates and opium in this country, and heroin, prescription opiates, opioids. And I think it's important to know where we've been to figure out where we're going. It's funny, I'm going to give you some dates here, and you'll see how history kind of repeated itself on this. We didn't learn the first time around. So opium's been around for a long time, thousands of years, a derivative of the poppy plant. The Asians used it a lot. But in 1810, a doctor came up with a formula for morphine. It's actually, morphine stands for Greek. It's a Greek term for God of dreams. Anybody that uses opiates will understand that completely. So in 1810, they came out with that. In 1850, the U.S. Decided that was a wonder drug for pain. Wonderful thing. And doctors were using it, and it was fantastic. It did take care of a lot of pain. Then we had the Civil War. Well, after the Civil War, all of a sudden, we have about 250,000 addicts in this country. Okay, we've figured out that opiates cause addiction. Big concern by the doctors. In 1874, there was a new drug that came out. It was developed in Germany. It's called heroin. And you get a kick out of this because it was advertised as a new non-addictive alternative for morphine. That's going to sound familiar in a minute to you here. So there was a big sales pitch out there, and man, Bayer Aspirin got on board, and they were developing heroin, putting it under cough syrup, and everybody was happy, a little too happy. By 1900, we had over 200,000 addicts from this new epidemic. In 1911, the government finally says, hey, okay, or not the government, but the medical community says, hey, this stuff's addictive. So Bayer takes it off the market, and in 1924, it was declared illegal. We went along pretty good after that. There was always a baseline of opiate abuse, heroin use. And in 1995 came around, and OxyContin was developed. OxyContin is an opiate very similar to heroin. Obviously made in a pharmaceutical company, but it's actually manufactured to have the same effect on the brain. So we're going to use this drug. Oh boy, this is a powerful painkiller drug. We're going to use it to treat cancer patients only because we feel it's pretty dangerous. Well, of course, some lobbyists from the drug companies pushed and pretty soon the FDA says, hey, we can treat any kind of pain with it. And in 2000, the federal government says this is going to be the decade of pain. We're going to eradicate pain from 2000 to 2010. We're going to focus on this issue. Well, we started using opiates in the form of Vicodin, Percocet, OxyContin. We're using all these things to try to eliminate pain. In the meantime, we created a whole generation full of addicts right now. In 2007, Purdue Pharmaceutical pled guilty in a federal court. Intent to defraud the public. They actually lied about OxyContin's addictive properties. They actually said it's 1% addictive. It was a total lie. Their own researchers told them at a corporate level, hey, this stuff's very addictive. They decided to put profits over human lives. They fined $635 million. Seems like a big amount of money. It's a $3 billion industry for them a year. So it's really a slap on the wrist. So we didn't learn much that first time around when we had morphine out and we had all the addicts and geez, we need to do something about that. So they brought in heroin in 1874, like I said, non-addictive, and here we are in 1995, we made the same mistake again. You know, it's unbelievable, and we get on the doctors a little bit and we say, hey, I can't believe you guys are pushing this stuff. Well, the doctors get most of their information from the pharmaceutical companies, you know. So we hammer on the doctors, but it goes way beyond that. So I like to say if your doctor anymore can't sit down and talk to you for a few minutes when he prescribes you an opiate, then you need to change doctors. That's not a knock on doctors. That just means that that particular doctor is not educated enough to prescribe you an opiate. Danger factor. What is the danger factor? The fact of the matter is, heroin gets the big name out there. Everybody knows heroin's bad. We all know that. But prescription opiates, they kill twice as many people a year as heroin and cocaine combined. So it's very, very important that when we talk about these drugs, we talk about opiates, we seem to want to segregate them. We want to talk about heroin over here, and we want to talk about prescription opioids over here, but actually they're the same thing. You know, it's all attacks the brain in the same fashion, and there's a doctor that's going to speak after me. He's very knowledgeable on this subject, and he's going to explain all that to you in a way that I think you're really going to enjoy. Another thing about the danger factor is I think Dan talked about guns, or Jerry did, I can't remember, but we all can agree on one thing, and I'm a gun advocate, but we can all agree that guns are dangerous. Absolutely. Not used properly. There's a safety factor involved there. The fact of the matter is, more people die of prescription drug overdoses than of gun homicides every year. We only have about 11,000 homicides every year due to guns. Now, we have 22,000 suicides to go along with it, but we only have about 11,000 homicides every year with guns. You know, we have upwards of 18,000, 20,000 prescription opioid deaths every year. So we got to treat opiates the same way we treat the other things in our society that are dangerous. And really, for the last 10 years, it's been, everybody seems to be a doctor. You know, I walked across a construction site a few months ago with a bad back. I had a cane. I bet a half a dozen people said to me, hey, I got something in the truck for you. You know, I got some Vicodin. I got something that'll relax you a little bit. So everybody, and it's because everybody thinks of these drugs as being so safe, you know, so safe, so harmless, that, I mean, hey, it's just like candy they're handing out. And so we got to work on that. The general public, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute here, but what I want to do right now and what I want to talk about the most today is the stigma placed on the heroin addict. And I'm going to bring a young kid up here, and he's going to talk for about 15 minutes and tell his story. You know, former athlete, good guy, a lot of friends, and he's going to talk about how opiates destroyed his life. And he's rebuilding it back right now. He's got a lot of heart. He's got a lot of guts. And he's standing up to a lot of adversity right now. And I'd like to bring you up here, Christopher Reisner.
Thanks, Mike. I can't tell you guys what Mike's meant to me in the past couple of years since we met. He's done everything possible for me, for some of my friends. He's truly changed my life. So thanks a lot, Mike. I'm too tall for your Mike. He might be too short. You know, I was an opiate addict for 8 years of my life. And I don't say opiate addict because it sounds better than saying heroin addict. I say it because I was addicted to prescription opiates for 4 years and to heroin for another 4 years. So one doesn't sound it does sound better than the other. You know, when you're telling your parents, you know, I'm an opiate addict, it sounds a little bit better than telling your parents, you know, I'm a heroin addict. Because I remember when I told my parents that I was doing heroin, it was, you know, they were more scared at that point than they were when I told them that I was doing, you know, Vicodins and I was addicted to prescription opiates. But there's no difference. I'm here to tell you right now that I've done prescription pills that blow heroin out of the water. The heroin that you can get on the street. In Jackson County, I've done strong heroin, but there's also quite a few medications that are stronger than heroin by far. And, you know, with this new thing, fentanyl being cut with heroin is scaring a lot of people. And, you know, they're thinking maybe that that's why so many people are dying from heroin overdoses. But I'm also here to tell you that you know, why fentanyl mixed with heroin certainly is as close to a death sentence as you can come. But there's no safe heroin mixed with anything. Cut with anything, heroin is heroin, and it's just as dangerous as fentanyl. But a little bit about myself. Probably the first time I ever took an opiate, I was maybe 16, 17 years old in high school, you know, just being passed around the hallway, and I never thought much of it. I was a four-year starter on varsity basketball at East Jackson High School. You know, I hold the record for every three-point record. I'm second leading scorer in school history. I probably had over 15 to 20 different opportunities to play college basketball at different schools. But I originally signed to play basketball with Adrian College, and the summer before I went, I started taking Vicodins pretty heavy. And the coach called from Adrian College and told me that he was taking a different position. So I ended up backing out on Adrian College, which was a huge mistake and led to a lot of things. But so then I played basketball at JCC. I ended up quitting the team about halfway through the season, my freshman year, and dropped out of college. And that's when I really started doing drugs pretty heavy, about the time I was 18 years old. You know, I had experimented with, I don't know, marijuana, cocaine, things like that. I think that's probably about as far as I ever went outside of opiates. But when I discovered opiates, you know, I knew that I felt like I'm home, you know, as sad as that sounds. But I started taking Vicodins, you know, and like everybody, I started taking 2 at a time. And then next thing you know, I was taking 4 at a time, then 6 at a time, all the way up until the point where I eventually met somebody that had oxycodone, and I got addicted to oxycodone. And along the way, you know, I was addicted to Oxycontin, every prescription opiate that you can think of. And I actually made a list here today of what I feel is the 25 most common prescription opiates that that your kids can get in Jackson County with pretty much with ease. They're the drugs that I've done, and some of you, there's things on the list that some of you probably have never heard of, that maybe your kids' grandparents get a prescription of and you don't think anything of it, but you know, they can steal their prescriptions. They can buy these things on the street, just like I did. But you know, I had ample opportunity to do other things with my life, but once I had the hook of addiction embedded as deep as possible, there really was no other option. You know, an addiction somewhat is a choice, but once you're addicted, there's no choice anymore. I put heroin in front of everything. It didn't matter. literally everything. And, you know, Mike and I are both extremely passionate about this. That's why I don't regret ever being addicted, you know, and that might sound crazy, but I really don't, because just like with basketball, which I played my entire life, I was extremely passionate about, and I still am. I still coach some kids now, and I'm extremely passionate. I'm extremely passionate about heroin and opiate addiction. I can't talk about cocaine addiction, and I can't talk about meth addiction and things like that. Addiction is addiction. But in my opinion, cocaine addiction is different than opiate addiction. I'm not going to say that it's peanuts compared, but it does pale in comparison, in my opinion. Just because of the rate that opiates kill people. And I've lost numerous friends, and I've lost numerous acquaintances. I almost killed my best friend because we were doing heroin together, snorting heroin, and he was an alcoholic, and you know, I was a heroin addict, and one time we went to hang out together, and he didn't do heroin nearly at the same rate that I did, but he would do it, you know, whenever he was with me, or he would throw some money on some to get some. And I went and picked him up, and I didn't realize that he had drank, and I went to East Jackson, so I'm not, the English wasn't my strong point. But anyway, he had already polished off a fifth that day, and it was about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And you know, so when I picked him up, he asked if I had any dope on me. I said, you know, if I was awake and it was during the day, I had dope on me. So I gave him a little bit, you know, and about a half an hour later, he was unconscious and on my parents' living room floor, and I had to call the ambulance. And they brought him back, and I literally thought that I almost killed my best friend. And so things like that happen when you're addicted, you know. Not only does addiction kill you, it puts you in situations to be killed. The things that you do for money, the places that you have to go to buy drugs. I was in a situation once, had I not been an addict, I never would have been in, where I saw somebody get grazed in the head with a bullet. And I never should have been in that situation. Looking, when I was 13 years old, if you would have asked me, would you ever think that you would see something like that, my answer would have been no. But I just want to go down this list real quick and just think if you've ever heard of these drugs. But these are all drugs that I've done and that your kids can get relatively easy. So just please pay attention to what your kids are doing. Vicodin, Percocet, Norco, hydrocodone, codeine, methadone, oxycodone, Oxycontin, morphine, hydromorphone, Dilaudid, Opana, fentanyl, Lortab, Lorcet, Zohydro ER, Tylenol 3, promethazine with codeine, cough syrup, Demerol, MS-Cotton, Endocet, Darvocet, Vivitrol, Tramadol, and Suboxone are all drugs, 25 drugs that are prescription drugs that are no different than heroin and are easily available. I've done all these drugs. All these drugs led me to heroin addiction. The last drug that I did before I was addicted to heroin was Opana, or hydromorphone, which was, you know, when I had to switch to heroin, I was upset because they reformulated Opana, and I couldn't do it anymore because it was better than heroin. But they all led me to heroin addiction. I've been to rehab 4 different times. Had it not been for people like Melissa Sequoia who taught me, you know, I feel like I've been to addiction college, to be honest with you, because there was, what, a 3-month program for an outpatient program after I got out of rehab, and I think I stayed for 2 years. I literally, and just to learn everything there was possible that I could learn. And, you know, things like that didn't change my life at the time, but all that knowledge that I gained eventually would change my life. And the last time that I ever used heroin, I also set up my drug dealer because I knew I had to do something different. And, you know, if you think about it, how serious can you be about getting clean if you're not willing to turn in the person that's making a living off your demise? And, you know, it's a scary thing to do. And if you know, you don't want to do it, tell Mike or I who he is or who she is, and we'll do it for you. Because when it comes to this stuff, you know, either heroin's going to kill you or, you know, you're going to be scared of a drug dealer retaliating. But we need to put the people in jail or prison that are making a living off killing people. And, you know, like Mike frequently says, I'll steal your quote real quick, to look the other way is to give permission in this, and when it comes to this topic. You know, you wouldn't let a rapist or a murderer live down the street and continually murder and rape people, you know, but yet you see the guy who has 50 cars pull up to his house every day, and you know one of the people that he's selling dope to, you know, but yet you can't pick up a phone and call. That's something that we got to do, you know, like Dr. Phelan said, the most important number is 1, and I truly believe that it is. We can all make a difference, one person at a time. I know I took a drug dealer off the street that made at least $35,000 to $5,000 a day, and he's not selling heroin probably now to at least 25 people. They're not getting their heroin from him anymore. They might get it from somewhere else, you know, and I might be labeled a snitch for the rest of my life, but I'm okay with that. That's completely fine with me. So there's things that we can do as public, and I think that we do have to do them now more than ever because it truly is an epidemic. But I can't say that it ruined my life, but for a long period of time it did ruin my life. It ruined my family's life. And I'm ashamed of a lot of things that I did while I was addicted, but I'm not ashamed of my addiction. You know, so that's all I have unless there's something Mike wanted me to say. Okay. Thanks a lot, guys.
By the way, Chris, you're not a snitch, you're a hero. Let's get that straight. You know, there's an awful stigma that's placed on the addict, the user, and it's wrong. It's totally wrong. You know, the perception that we have. I made the same mistake. I had the same perception. So I'm saying we got to open our eyes a little bit here. But we think of the average addict as a bad kid from the wrong side of town with a crummy set of parents, and we apply that stigma. And that stigma is so detrimental to the recovery of any individual out there. First off, his parents don't want to talk about it to anybody. They can't go get help because they're afraid somebody's going to find out. They're afraid somebody's going to find out that their child is so sick, that their child is having this medical emergency, and that's exactly what this is. Addiction is a medical emergency. Addiction to opiates. You've got a better chance of surviving most cancers than you do of getting off this. So the first thing you got to understand is, yes, we have a medical emergency going on here, and so you got to get out and talk to people. And you know, I've talked to a lot of people. They come in my office, and I'll say, "Listen, this is what we have to do. We have to get your kid into at least a minimum of a 30-day stay." And I'm going to tell you right now, a 30-day stay does very little. You know, you can spend $20,000, $30,000 for 30 days in a rehab, but I'm going to tell you the real work starts when you get out. But they'll say to me, they'll say, well, Mike, I really can't send him away for 30 days or 60 days or 90 days. And I'll say, well, why not? You know, we'll help you with that. We'll help you finance that. You know, what's the problem? Well, his grandma and grandpa may find out. Well, good Lord. You know, I always look at them and I say, well, they're going to find out when they go to the funeral and they have to look at him in that casket. And they still won't relent. They're still afraid of this perception that somebody's going to think they're a bad parent. Somebody's going to think their kid's a bad person. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, opiates are 100% addictive. I don't care who it is in this room right here. Y'all want to take them on a daily basis? You're going to get an addiction. You're going to develop a dependency and then addiction. And the only difference between those two terms right there, there's a very fine line. Dependency is when you need it every day to function, and the doctor that's going to speak after me will explain that. You're going to need that, put that in your system every day just to function, just to get up in the morning, just to get through the day. And I don't think most people understand that. Especially, it really irritates me when I'm sitting across the table from somebody and they're on their third martini and they look at me and say, Mike, it's those damn drugs is what's causing this problem. And you know, you think about it a little bit. What do you do when you're drinking? You know, I have beer just like everybody else too, so I'm not being critical here. You're trying to alter your mind. You're trying to get to a better state. Well, that's the same thing these kids are doing. And by God, we didn't tell them that this little pill, I mean, I didn't know. But we didn't tell them this little pill prescribed by a doctor, perceived to be absolutely 100% safe. My God, my grandma gets it. It's got to be safe for me. I'm not going to smoke any of that pot. I'm not going to go get drinking and driving. I'm going to take one of them pills. Well, one of them little pills make you feel really good. And if you have any anxiety whatsoever, you know, people do drugs for a lot of different reasons. They don't feel right about themselves. They're too heavy. They're socially inept. It makes them nervous to be in a room like this. And God forbid should they have to come up and talk to somebody. But I tell you what, you put an opiate in your system, that all goes away. So we have this mental part of it, and we have this physical part of this addiction, and then we got the stigma that's placed on top of it that we don't want to talk to anybody about it. By God, what are they going to think of me? We got to get over that, you know. Here's a prime example. Here's like every other addict I've ever met, right? He's sitting right here. And you know what they do? They're constantly calling me up and saying, hey, Mike, when can we go talk to some kids? These horrible people, these horrible heroin addicts, these people that you think are not worth, you know, anything, they're the ones out fighting this fight right now. The ones that went through the meat grinder, the ones that made it back. And Chris right here, he fights every day to stay clean. Every single day. It's a struggle for him. But he's fighting back. He's fighting back to help your kids. He's fighting back to help my grandkids. He's fighting back to help his own family. And so the stigma that everybody places on this young kid, these young kids that are battling addiction is totally wrong. It's totally false. And it needs to be addressed. And that's what we're going to do. And, you know, I talked about my son's ashes here. And out of his ashes came our foundation. And out of his ashes came kids like Chris fighting back. And out of his ashes, events like today take place. And as a community, we can do wonders. You know, I hear a lot of pessimism a lot. Geez, Mike, I know you're trying to help. I know you feel bad. You know, and I know this probably makes you feel better to do this, but you really don't think you can really beat this. You can win this battle. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, I've never been in a fight I didn't think I could win. And by God, you got to believe that. If you can't dream it, it's not going to happen. If you don't believe you can win, you're not going to win. In this little community, Jackson, we're way ahead of everybody else. We're ahead of most communities in the entire country. So out of this little community of Jackson, Michigan, if we pull together, and look who's here today. We got the politicians here today. We got people from the medical community here today. We have people from the educational institutions here today. We have everybody on board right now to sit together, to work together. People from all different conservatives, liberals, black, white, Muslim, Jewish, Christians, all with common ground here today in a common battle. And by God, they could learn a little something in Washington. That's how you get things done. You find common ground. These are complex problems that we have. And anybody knows that in order to solve complex problems, you need ideas from all these different sectors that we have here. And it's a collaboration of all these ideas that get to the real answer. It's not just one person. It's not just one guy's thought pattern, but it's everybody working together, hitting this problem from every single angle you can think of. And everybody asks me, hey, what can I do? What can I do? I'm just a regular guy. I'm a regular, what can I do? Be a citizen, Read up on this information. You come to a function like this, you're going to learn quite a bit today. You better listen up and listen up close. And you take that information, you take it home with you, you call somebody up, you say, hey, did you know about this problem that we're having? You spread this information. And right now, we have all these players on board right now, but you know who we don't have on board? We don't have public opinion on board. And when I say public opinion, sure, everybody knows heroin's bad. Everybody knows that. But when you start talking about Vicodin, Norcos, Oxycontin, well, that's a doctor-prescribed drug, Mike. That's not like a heroin. You couldn't be farther from the truth on that. So, we got to disseminate this information. We got to get it out to everybody. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it to your family. You have to talk about it to your kids. I'm a big fan of teaching kids at a very early age, 5th and 6th grade, how these different drugs work on the brain. We all classify drugs into one big thing. Put them in a big pail, call them drugs. Well, all these drugs work in different ways. I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not advocating smoking pot, so do not get me mistake what I'm saying right here. I'm just illustrating the point that marijuana is totally different than opiates. Works on a totally different part of the brain. I think kids need to know that. They need to understand that. They need to know when they get to be in 8th and 9th, 10th grade. And everybody in here that's got a child, grandchild, whatever, in that age group, they're at risk. It's in every single school that we have. And we got some great school systems. We have Michigan Center, Napoleon, Western School. They've all had us in. They said, hey, we're going to donate Columbia School District. They're not worried about the stigma. They're worried about solving the problem. And that's what we have to focus on. These schools are all ahead of the curve right now. We've talked to all these schools, talked to young kids, and man, they are so interested, you can't believe it. You could hear a pin drop most of the time. And they know exactly what we're talking about. And you say, I don't think, Mike, how early to think? Well, I'm going to tell you, I was talking at one of the school districts, and I was talking to 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. Had the whole school in the gymnasium. Got done talking, and a little kid raises his hand. He says, yeah. I said, yeah, I got a question. He says, well, not really a question. He says, but I just wanted to know, my grandfather does oxys. That told me 2 big things right there. Told me, number one, he knew the term Oxycontin. He knew the slang term of being oxy. But how many people in this room had any idea what their grandma or grandfather was taking for medication when they were in 8th grade? And not one. I can guarantee you that. Well, they know it now because they talk about it at school. They know where these drugs are. They know how to get their hands on them. You think they're getting them from drug dealers? Well, only about 5% of that at the school age level are getting from drug dealers. They're getting from my medicine cabinet, your medicine cabinet, the guy down the street's medicine cabinet. Everybody seems to be a doctor and a prescriber now. Most people actually, don't buy from drug dealers at the prescription drug level. A little different story when you're buying heroin, but. So these are all, all these things that we're going to talk about today. We have a hell of a shot. A hell of a shot at stopping a lot of this, There's no question in my mind whatsoever. And like I said, I've never been in a fight I didn't think I could win. And I don't plan on losing this one either. But we got to get rid of the negativity. I hear this all the time about, well, Mike, Jackson's a prison town. There's really nothing to do for the kids there. There's, matter of fact, first chance I get, I can save up enough money for a bus ticket, I think I'll get out of town. Well, don't worry about saving the money, because if that's the way you think about this town, I'll buy you that bus ticket. I am so sick and tired of the negativity that, you can't come to me with criticism without constructive solutions along with it. I'll listen to criticism all day long as you've got a constructive solution. But to sit here and be pessimistic and say this isn't going to work, that isn't going to work, as far as I'm concerned, you can get the hell out of my town. Um, Good thing we're not on a construction site. That would have came out a little different. But, like I say, dream big. We dream about this stuff happening. I want to open the newspaper or be watching the news cycle one of these days and say, Jackson, Michigan, big plan, big action plan. I want to see the numbers coming down in Jackson. It's entirely possible. But when we go to these quarterly meetings, we can't just go there and show up and say, hey, this is great. I went to a meeting. You come there with an idea. We'll listen to that idea. We'll give that idea some merit. A lot of smart people in this room, very smart people. And if we collaborate, we put our heads together, and we come up with plans of actions. Meetings are great. Functions are great like this, but you need plans of action. We can talk about this every year, but if we don't have a plan of action, nothing gets done. So when we come to that quarterly meeting, and I want everybody who feels as passionate about this subject as I do to show up at those quarterly meetings, come there with ideas, come there armed for a presentation. And we'd love to listen to it. And we can beat this battle. We can win this war. And we're going to drill down on this issue, and we're not going to give up. Heroin through the first blow heroin through the first blow at my family. We certainly intend to throw the last. Thank you, and we'll answer any questions you want. No question is off limit to me.
We've got about 3 minutes of questions. We're going to have questions at the panel session too. If anyone has questions, I can come out of the audience if you want a question for Mike or Chris at this time. One question I would have, Mike, you talked about stigma. What can we do as a community to, as a citizen, address that individually?
Well, first thing you got to do, Jerry, is you got to educate yourself a little bit about the subject. And anybody can do that. You don't need to go to school. You don't need to sign up for a class. We certainly have all kinds of technology available to everybody in here. You educate yourself. That's the biggest weapon you have, is to educate yourself, know what it is you're up against. Read about the average heroin addict. It's actually a white middle-class kid, as a matter of fact. So all your thoughts about being, oh, it must be the blacks, or oh, it must be the Hispanics, no, you're totally wrong on that issue. And I know education is the biggest key to all this, and once you educate yourself a little bit, you're going to understand that there's no shame here. There's bad behavior. Bad behavior is when you first took the first pill. After that, you'll find out that the injury that it causes to the brain prevents you from good behavior after that. You're locked in at that point.
Mike, what would you say to the youth in our community? What can they do?
Well, the youth, I love the youth. Kids are really smart. I don't think we ever give enough credit to young kids, the intelligence that they have. And I think we need to talk to them with the scientific evidence that we have and how brains work. And I'm always say this, but I'm a big fan of teaching kids how to think, not what to think. I'm not a fan of saying, don't do it because I said so. Don't do it. Let's do the research. We're going to figure out why you shouldn't do it. And then I'm guarantee you, kids will make the right choice once they look at the facts. They haven't seen the facts. All they know is, hey, I can't drink and drive. If I smoke pot, they're going to smell it on me. But boy, I can take this little pill that's prescribed by the medical community. That's not a knock on the medical community. That's just the thought process of a young kid. And this has got to be perfectly safe. I can do that. So we have to make them understand what exactly that's doing to their brain. I think you teach them the science of this, they'll pick up a lot on that, and I think we'll see a lot of progress. And you can rally kids, and we got to make leaders out of young kids. And we got to teach them the ways of the world, not just how to read and write and do arithmetic, but we got to teach them about interest rates and how to get by in this world. We got to teach them about entitlement programs. That they're not to be used for a crutch to dependency, but they're to be used for a bridge to success. And I don't think we're doing enough of this. We're so worried about core value, math, and all this good stuff that we're not teaching social skills like we should be.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Chris, for your presentation.